What's up guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Tish. I hope you guys are doing well. It's been a long time since I've filmed a video for you guys, so I hope you guys enjoy this one. Today's video is going to be about the crown jewels of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The crown jewels of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland are some of the oldest and most controversial of history across Europe and the world. Their history not only tells us the story of the islands it is held, but the world we live in today. Some pieces even standing the test of time for more than 1,000 years, surviving war and revolution. And with that, let's learn about the history and the stories these priceless artifacts have to tell us about themselves and the monarchy we know so personally today, and the future they will have in the upcoming coronation of King Charles III. Let's start off with, what are the crown jewels? The crown jewels are pieces of jewelry that are part of the monarchy's regalia, whether it be current or former. Although improvements may be made since the Middle Ages, the existing items have generally been passed down unchanged because of what they represent and the monarchy's continuity. The jewels are ceremonial treasures that have been acquired by royal families across the world, and in the coming months we will see one of the biggest celebrations with the use of these ancient treasures in the UK, the coronation of the King and Queen. We will see these priceless artifacts in use for the first time in 70 years. The British coronation regalia are the only functioning set in Europe. The UK is still using its regalia for the consecration ceremony of the crowning of the sovereign. The collection is the most historically comprehensive of any regalia in the world. They are symbols of more than 1,000 years of monarchy. British kings and queens are invested and crowned using these jewels and artifacts that then signify their position as head of state of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth nations, Supreme Governor of the Church of England, and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The jewels feature symbols and national emblems of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and of the many other nations the king is head of state of. In Britain, the first known use of a crown dates back to 200 and 150 BCE and was uncovered by the archaeologists in Deal, Kent in 1988. Within the tomb of the Mill Hill warrior were a sword, a brooch, ceremonial shield, and a beautiful bronze crown with a single arch that sat directly on the wearer's head. Crowns were worn by military and religious leaders at this time as emblems of authority. Crowns were still worn by priests after the Roman invasion of Britain in 43 CE. A Roman-era bronze crown with two arches and images of male faces, as well as two bronze diadems with adjustable headbands and repoussé silver ornaments, were discovered during a 1950s dig in a field in Hockwold, Coombe, Wilton, Norfolk. One diadem has a plaque in the middle showing a man holding a spear and something resembling a shepherd's crook, which are predecessors to the orb and scepter that subsequently became the royal insignia. The Romans left Britain around the beginning of the 5th century, and the Angles and Saxons moved in. A heptarchy of brand new kingdoms started to form. Regional kings employed ceremonial and insignia as a means of establishing their rule. The tomb of an unidentified king at Sutton Hoo sheds light on the regalia of a pre-Christian Anglo-Saxon king. Evidence suggests that the unnamed king may have been Raedwald of East Anglia. The elaborate Sutton Hoo helmet, which consists of an iron cap, a neck guard, and a face mask embellished with copper alloy, depictions of animals and warriors, set with garnets, was found inside an early 7th century tomb that was discovered in 1939. An ornamental sword, a ceremonial shield, and a large whetstone scepter with an iron ring and a stag's head on top were also buried with him. Use of regalias by monarchs in England can be traced back to when it was converted to Christianity in the early Middle Ages. A permanent set of coronation regalia once belonging to Edward the Confessor was established after he was made a saint in the 12th century. And it is believed that the Confessor's regalia may have been the first set of regalia ever established in England. These holy relics were kept at Westminster Abbey, the venue of coronations, since 1066, and another set of regalia was preserved for religious feasts and state openings of Parliament. Collectively, these objects came to be known as the Jewels of the Crown. Most of the present collection dates from around 350 years ago, when Charles II ascended the throne. After the monarchy was overthrown in 1649 during the English Civil War, the medieval and Tudor regalia had been sold or destroyed. A late 12th century anointing spoon, which is the oldest item, and 3 early 17th century swords are the only objects that predate the restoration. The regalia's precious stones were sold separately and the precious metals sent to the mint to be coined. The coronation chair remained intact as it was used in 1653 at Westminster Hall when Oliver Cromwell was installed as the Lord Protector. However, detailed records of the regalia survived and replacements for the lost regalia were made at a cost of nearly £12,185 for Charles II's coronation in 1661. Since King Charles's coronation, there have been many additions and alterations to the regalia. New sets of regalia had to be made in 1685 for James II's wife, Mary of Modena, the first queen consort to be crowned since the Restoration, and for Mary II in 1689 when she was crowned with her husband William III as queen in her own right. Following the union of the kingdoms England and Scotland in 1707, the regalia was still worn by British monarchs, and it became standard practice for a while that the jewels were hired. Afterwards, the stones were returned to the jewelers, and the regalia was sometimes reset with crystals or paste and put into the jewel house for display. The monarch would then use a state crown set with coloured jewels for parliamentary use. More often, the crowns were dismantled, leaving only the frames. For example, George IV tried to persuade Parliament to buy the stones for his crown so that it could remain as a permanent set in the crown jewels. He failed, and the crown was eventually dismantled. The regalia today is made up of 23,578 precious stones, including the cullinan 1, the world's largest clean-cut diamond at around 530 carats, which is set in the sovereign scepter with cross. It was fashioned from the namesake cullinan, which was unearthed in South Africa in 1905 and given to Edward VII as the largest gem-quality raw diamond ever discovered. The cullinan 2 at 317 carats, Stuart, St. Edward and the Black Princess ruby, a sizable red spinel, all adorn the imperial state crown. The 105 carat Koh-i-Noor diamond, which Queen Victoria received from India, has been a part of the 3 consort crowns. Now let's talk about the regalia itself. The crowns of Britain's crown jewels are the center of the entire collection. They are the main symbols of authority. They have a very simple structure. They are today housed in the Tower of London along with many of the other ancient pieces. Let's start off with the centerpiece of this massive collection, St. Edward's crown. When the monarch is crowned, the centerpiece of the coronation regalia, which has the name of St. Edward the Confessor, is placed on the sovereign's head. St. Edward's crown, which is made of gold and finished in 1661, is adorned with 444 gems, including amethysts, garnets, periods, rubies, sapphires, topazes, tourmalines, and zircons. The hefty base of the gold and cluster of semi-precious stones on the coronation crown closely resembles those of the medieval era, but the proportionally enormous arches are a Baroque artifice. Because to their nearly identical weight and a 1661 invoice for adding gold to an existing crown, it has long been believed that St. Edward's crown is the original crown. It was originally created in 1660 according to new research published in 2008 and was improved the following year when Parliament boosted funding for Charles II's coronation. The crown is 30 centimeters tall and 2.23 kilograms in weight, making it incredibly heavy. And after 1689, kings and queens of the UK had the option of wearing St. Edward's crown, which was placed on the high altar, or a lighter custom coronation crown. In 1838, it was completely absent from the ceremonial during Queen Victoria's coronation. And in 1911, George V revived the use of St. Edward's crown in coronation, and it has been done so ever since, including in the upcoming coronation this week. In order to symbolize her authority, Queen Elizabeth II chose to have a stylized version of this crown used on her coat of arms, her badges, her logos, and all of her insignia throughout the Commonwealth realms, and in 1953 this replaced Edward VII's 1901 adoption of a Tudor-style crown, and King Charles III has since chosen to reinstate the more masculine Tudor-style crown in his insignia and emblems. Now let's talk about the imperial state crown. The king typically wears a significantly lighter crown while leaving Westminster Abbey for the yearly state opening of Parliament. The current imperial state crown was created in 1937 for the coronation of George VI and is a replica of the state crown built for Queen Victoria in 1838, which was created using stones from its own predecessor, the state crown of George I, and had deteriorated to a bad condition of disrepair. In 1953, the arches of the imperial state crown were lowered by 2.5 centimeters to make the crown appear more feminine, and it was altered to fit Queen Elizabeth II's head. In addition, 2,868 diamonds, 273 pearls, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, and 5 rubies. The crown is made of a gold, silver, and platinum. The cullinan 2 diamond, sometimes referred to as the second star of Africa, was placed in the crown in 1909. It is one of the largest stones, weighing 63 kgs and weighing 317 carats. The front cross's 170 carat Black Prince ruby is a large Copcon red spinel rather than a ruby. Henry V allegedly wore it at the Battle of Agincourt, and tradition has it that it was handed to Edward the Black Prince by the Spanish King Peter of Castile in 1367. It is unclear how the stone returned to the royal collection after the interregnum, but a sizable ruby that was purchased for the crown jewels in 1661 for £400 may very possibly have been the spinel. The Stuart sapphire, weighing 104 carats, is set on the back of the crown, and St. Edward's sapphire, allegedly stolen from the Confessor's Ring when his body was reinterred in Westminster Abbey in 1163, is set with the top cross. 3 of the 4 pearls hanging below the mound are frequently attributed to Queen Elizabeth I, but this association may be false or may be true. We will never know. Now that we have discussed the sovereign's crown, let's talk about the consort crowns, or the queen's crowns. After the Restoration, wives of kings and queen consorts traditionally wore the state crown of Mary of Modena, wife of James II, who first wore it at their coronation in 1685. A matching diadem that consorts wore in procession to the abbey is now set with crystals and cultured pearls in place of the original 561 rented diamonds and 129 pearls. 177 diamonds, 1 ruby, and 1 sapphire and 1 emerald were once set in the diadem. That the crown was deemed to be overly theatrical and in need of repair by 19th century, so in 1831, Queen Adelaide, the wife of King William IV, had the crown of Queen Adelaide constructed using diamonds from her own jewellery. So began a custom of having a crown fashioned especially for each queen consort. Queen Alexandra, the wife of King Edward VII, was given the crown of Queen Alexandra in 1902 to wear at their coronation. This European-style crown is flatter and has 8 half arches instead of the traditional 4. It was the first consort crown to feature the Koh-i-Noor diamond, which was given to Queen Victoria in 1850 as a result of the British conquest of Punjab. And it was set with more than 3,000 diamonds. It was reduced in size from its original 191 carats, which was set in an armlet, to an oval brilliant that weighed 105 carats, which Victoria fixed in a brooch and a circlet. The second crown in the collection was the crown of Queen Mary, which was created in 1911 for Queen Mary, the wife of King George V, and is likewise uncommon for the British crown due to its 8 half arches. Mary spent her own money for the Art Deco inspired crown in the hopes that future queen consorts will utilize it as an heirloom. In fact, it was officially confirmed in February of 2023 that Queen Camilla would be crowned on May 6, 2023 alongside King Charles III wearing Queen Mary's crown. Resetting the crown with the original cullinan diamonds and eliminating 4 of its 8 half arches are 2 planned modifications. The Queen has decided to pay tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth with some of the jewels being used, including using one of the Queen's cullinan brooches. Queen Mary's crown was originally home to the 94.4 carat and 63.4 carat cullinan 3 and 4 diamonds. It is now covered in 2,200 diamonds in total. When its arches were made removable in 1914, it could be worn as a circlet or an open crown. Queen Mary continued to wear the crown without its arches as Queen Mother after George V died. So Queen Elizabeth, the wife of King George VI and afterwards known as the Queen Mother, was given the crown of Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother to wear during their coronation in 1937. The Queen Mary's crown was the inspiration for this unique British crown, which contains 4 rather than 8 half arches. Over 2,800 diamonds, including the Kohinoor in the center of the front cross, are used in the crown's decoration. The Queen Mother's crown also includes a duplicate of the 22.5 carat Lahore diamond that the East India Company gave to Queen Victoria in 1851 and a 17.3 carat diamond that the Sultan Abdul of the Ottoman Empire gave her in 1856. And finally, during the late Queen Mother's funeral and lying in state in 2002, the crown was placed on top of the casket, and it has been since housed in the Tower of London in the display. Alrighty, now let's talk about what the heir to the throne wears on his head to the coronation, where there have been many made and the current Prince of Wales has a number to choose from starting with the coronet made for Frederick, Prince of Wales, George II's eldest son. A fairly understated gold coronet was created in 1728. The son and heir apparent of the crown shall use and bear his coronet consisting of the crosses of fleur-de-lis, with one arch and in the middle a ball and cross as stated in royal warrant granted by Charles II in 1677. While demonstrating that the prince is superior to the other royal offspring whose coronets lack arches, the single arch suggests the inferiority to the monarch. When Frederick initially took a seat in the House of Lords, his coronet was put on a cushion in front of him. He never wore it. Later, when they were princes of Wales, George III, George IV and Edward VII used it. The future George V was given a new silver gilt coronet to wear at Edward VII's coronation in 1902 due to the coronet's age. The arch on this coronet is elevated as opposed to the preceding coronet's depressed arch. The coronet was worn by George's eldest son, Edward VIII, the Duke of Windsor, at his 1911 coronation a month later. Edward was invested as Prince of Wales at Carnarvon Castle. The purpose of bringing back the ceremony, which had not been held since the early 17th century, was to raise the royal family's profile in Wales. For the event, Gascon John created the princely regalia known as the Honours of Wales, which included a Welsh gold circlet with pearls, amethyst and carved daffodils, a rod, a ring, a sword and a gown with doublet and sash. After becoming king in 1936, Edward VIII abdicated the following year and moved to France, where he kept the 1902 coronet until his passing in 1972. In its place, a new coronet crafted of gold and platinum and embellished with diamonds and emeralds had to be produced in 1969 for the investiture of King Charles III. It and the rod joined the 1728 and 1902 coronets in the Jewel House in 2020. Lastly, for the crowns at least, let's just touch on the non-coronation crowns in the Jewel House. 2 crowns are present that were never meant to be worn during a coronation. The 10 cm tall and fashioned with 1,187 diamonds, Queen Victoria's little diamond crown, was created in 1870 for Victoria to wear on top of her widow's cap. She frequently substituted it for the much heavier imperial state crown at state openings of Parliament. With the Queen's demise in 1901, her daughter-in-law Queen Alexandra and later Queen Mary inherited the crown and it went into the crown jewels. And lastly, the imperial crown of India was worn by George V when he and Queen Mary went to the Delhi Darbar in 1911 to be declared as Emperor of India. It was not possible for him to wear St. Edward's crown or the imperial state crown because the British Constitution prevents coronation regalia from leaving the United Kingdom. Therefore, one had to be fashioned especially for the occasion. It has 6,170 diamonds, 9 emeralds, 4 rubies and 4 sapphires in total. Since it has not been worn, the crown is currently regarded as a piece of the crown jewels. Alrighty, after talking about the crowns and coronets that will be worn at the coronation, let's now talk about the objects that will be used in the procession to the coronation, and let's talk about the items that will be used in the coronation. Starting off with the swords of state. The swords of state represent the monarch's responsibilities as the head of state of the British Armed Forces and defender of the faith. The katana, or blunt sword of mercy, the sword of spiritual justice, and the sword temporal justice are borne before the monarch in the abbey. All of them are thought to have been provided during James I's reign between 1610 and 1620, most likely by a member of the Worshipful Company of Cutlers utilizing blades made in the 1580s by Italian blacksmiths. King Charles II left them at the abbey along with St. Edward's regalia. Swords had been crafted from scratch for every coronation since the 15th century up until that moment. They were purchased during the Civil War, returned during the Restoration, and used for the first time at the coronation of James II in 1685. The two-handed sword of state, created in 1678, is carried in front of the monarch at the state openings of Parliament and serves as a symbol of the monarch's power. Its 1689-made hardwood sheath is covered in crimson velvet and embellished with fleur-de-lis, portcullises, and the silver-gilt national symbols of England, Scotland, and Ireland. The crosspiece of the sword's handle is made up of the English lion and the Scottish unicorn. The cumbersome sword of state is swapped out before the investiture for the smaller sword of offering, which is referred to as one of true coronation sword. It is gilded leather sheath which George IV ordered for his lavish 1821 coronation and is covered in 1,251 diamonds, 16 rubies, 2 sapphires, and 2 turquoises. The sword's handle is embellished with 2,141 diamonds, 12 emeralds, and 4 rubies. While its blade is made of Damascus steel, the stones are placed to resemble acorns, oak leaves, roses, thistles, and shamrocks. At each end of the crosspiece are 2 diamond lion heads with ruby eyes. The sword George purchased cost him more than £5,000 out of his own pocket, a startling departure from the austere £2 swords his 18th century forebears had been using. It was used during each coronation since 1911, while still belonging to the royal family until 1903, when it was placed with the crown jewels. The sword, which is used to gird and bless the king, is given back to the keeper of the jewel house by the abbey in exchange for a token payment of £5. It is then carried during the rest of the ritual while not being sheathed. Prior to Ireland's separation from the United Kingdom in 1922, the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland possessed the 17th century Irish sword of state, which has been on display in the jewel house since 1959. The Celtic harp is adorned on the handle, which is shaped like a lion and a unicorn. The sword was given to each incoming viceroy at Dublin Castle, where it typically rested across the arms of a throne, standing in the monarch or the queen when they were not there. In front of the kings who paid Dublin officials, it was carried in a procession. The sword was presented in 1921 when George V officially opened the Northern Ireland Parliament. The sword was displayed at Dublin Castle in 2018 as part of the Making of Majesty exhibition, the first time the sword had returned back to Ireland in 95 years. The next processional object that might be used in the coronation of King Charles III is St. Edward's staff. Actually, it is going to be used. It was confirmed a couple of days ago. The trumpets and ceremonial maces. A ceremonial gold walking stick measuring 1.4 meters in length, St. Edward's staff was crafted for King Charles II in 1661. At the top is a simple mound, and a cross at the bottom is a steel pike. Although the pre-interregnum version was made of gold and silver and was crowned with a dove, this item is probably certainly a replica of the long rod included in the inventory of the royal plate and jewels destroyed in 1649. Since the purpose of the staff in the coronation has been lost since the Middle Ages, it is brought into the abbey by a peer and placed on the altar, where it remains throughout the ritual. The crown jewels also include 16 silver trumpets dating between 1780 and 1848. 9 are covered in crimson silk damask banners that were manufactured for Queen Victoria's coronation in 1838 and are adorned with gold coats of arms since the 19th century. When the corps of state trumpeters were eliminated as a cost-saving move, they have not been utilized. The primary responsibility of the trumpeters was to play at the state dinner that followed the coronation in Westminster Hall. while also sounding a fanfare at the significant moments in the ceremony. Today, the Central Band of the Royal Air Force and Band of the Household Cavalry perform official events with their own trumpets. And lastly, of the processional objects, maces, which were originally the deadly weapons of medieval knights, later became ceremonial items carried by sergeants at arms and now stand for the monarch's power. The royal mace, which dates back to the Charles II's reign, must be on the table in order for the House of Commons to conduct business legally. The House of Lords also uses two maces from the reigns of Charles II and William III, one of which is put on a woolsack prior to sessions and is not present while a monarch is present in person to give the king or queen's speech. There were 16 maces in the 17th century, but only 13 remain today, with 10 of them on exhibit at the Tower of London in the royal procession at coronations and state openings of Parliament. 2 of these are carried. Each mace is roughly 1.5 meters long and weighs 10 kgs on average. They were created between the 1660 and 1695 and are silver gilt. Let's talk about the objects King Charles will be anointed with, starting off with the ampulla. The ampulla is a hollow gold vase that was created in 1661 and is formed like an eagle spread wings, with its wings spread. It is 20.5 centimeters tall and weighs 660 grams. Its head unscrews, allowing for oil to flow into the vessel and out the whole of the beak. The original ampulla was a little stone pile that kings would occasionally wear around their necks as pendants and otherwise kept inside a golden reliquary in the shape of an eagle. The Virgin Mary is said to have visited Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in 1162 until 1170 and given him a gold eagle and some oil for anointing English rulers, according to the legend from the 14th century. The ampulla was initially used at Henry IV's coronation for the first time in 1399, and Richard III deposited it at the Abbey in 1483 for protection with St. Edward's regalia. The same quantity, also known as the holy oil of St. Thomas, was used to anoint every succeeding monarch except Mary I until it eventually ran out in 1625. It is unknown how or why the vessel itself came to be reinterpreted as an eagle perched on a dome after the restoration. The anointing artifacts are second only to St. Edward's crown in terms of religious significance, and in 2013 the ampulla was displayed next to the crown on the altar of Westminster Abbey at a service commemorating the 60th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. Next is the 27 centimeter long coronation spoon, which is made of silver gilt and was embellished with 4 pearls in the 17th century and comes from the late 12th century. The Archbishop of Canterbury dips 2 fingers into grooves created by a ridge that splits the bowl in half to anoint the king as Supreme Governor of the Church of England. It might have first been employed to combine wine and water in a chalice. James I was crowned King of England in 1603, and that was the first time the spoon is recorded being used to anoint a ruler. When the monarchy was restored, Kinnersley, yeoman of the removing wardrobe, gave it back to Charles II. The spoon is the earliest surviving piece of the crown jewels and the sole English royal goldsmith's creation from the 1100s, and was most likely created for Henry II or Richard I. It was initially included in the royal collection in 1349 as a spoon of ancient form. The spoon was purchased by Clement Kinnersley, yeoman of the removing wardrobe, in 1649 for 16 shillings. Charles II received it back after the monarchy was restored. After the monarch is anointed, it is followed by the investiture ceremony with the coronation robes and ornaments, and now we're going to be talking about those robes and ornaments. Since the Middle Ages, the garment's form hasn't altered much, although they all have priestly overtones. After the English Reformation, the custom of donning St. Edward's robe came to a stop in 1547, but James I brought them back in 1603 to stress his belief in the divine character of kingship. A king additionally wore a cloth of gold, buskins or sandals in addition to the robes, depending on the size of their foot. During the Civil War, these sacred artifacts were burned along with the royal crowns and decorations. Starting with Charles II, new robes were manufactured for every monarch. However, this practice came to a stop in 1911 when George V began donning the supertunica and imperial mantle, both of which were designed for George IV in 1821. Additionally, George VI and Queen Elizabeth II, who succeeded him, wore them. The gold robes weigh about 10 kilograms altogether. The Worshipful Company of Girdlers produced a brand new stole for Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. As members of the Commonwealth, which was presided over by the Queen, it is decorated with floral symbols representing Australia, Canada, Sri Lanka, India, New Zealand, and the 4 British nations. Finally, before we move on to the scepters, I just want to apologize for the darkness. Load shedding is unfortunately struck in my country. So, yeah. Now let's talk about the scepters of their majesties that they will be using and the rest of the coronation ornaments, including the shepherd's staff and the bishop's crozier. They are the ancestors of the scepter and a symbolic ornament, a rod grasped by the monarch during the coronation. The regalia for the coronation includes 2 gold scepters that date back to 1661. The scepter with cross of the sovereign symbolizes his or her temporal authority as head of state. The entire piece is 92 centimeters long, 1.17 kilograms in weight, and set with 1 composite of amethyst, 6 spinels, 7 sapphires, 31 diamonds, 15 emeralds, 15 rubies, and 333 diamonds. The Great Star of Africa, popularly known as cullinan 1, the largest clean-cut diamond in the world at nearly 530 carats, was incorporated into the redesign in 1910. It was a piece of a rough diamond that was weighed 3,106 carats that I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video. It was given the name Cullinan after Thomas Cullinan, the mining company's chairman. When worn as a brooch, the stone can be detached from the golden clasp, holding it, and worn as a pendant hanging from Cullinan II, which is set in the imperial state crown. Queen Mary, the wife of George V, frequently wore it in this manner. The amethyst sits above the pear-shaped diamond and is topped with a cross patay and is covered in a tiny diamond of emeralds. Next is the rod of equity and mercy, also referred to as the scepter with the dove of the sovereign. It is a symbol of their spiritual function. Despite being nearly the same weight as the scepter with cross, it is only a little longer by 1.1 meters. 285 gems, including 94 diamonds, 53 rubies, 10 emeralds, 4 sapphires, and 3 spinels are set in the scepter's decoration. Bands of priceless stones wrap around the pole. The Holy Ghost is symbolized by a white enameled dove with its wings extended, that it is perched on top of a plain cross and a gold wand set with diamonds at the top. It was likely based on the German scepter, which had the imperial eagle on top and first appeared in the 11th century. The penultimate piece of ceremonial garb to be presented is the scepter with dove. The monarch is crowned with St. Edward's crown while holding both scepters. The Queen Consort's scepter with cross and the Queen Consort's ivory rod with dove are 2 scepters that were constructed for Mary of Modena, the wife of James II, in 1685 and are part of the crown jewels. This dove is smaller than the sovereign's dove and has folded wings. It was last worn by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, at the 1937 coronation of her husband, King George VI. Now let's talk about the golden orb that we all saw on the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II. All succeeding monarchs, with the exception of the early Stuart kings James I and Charles I, who chose for the medieval coronation order, used an orb or a form of globus crucica at an English coronation. Beginning with Henry VIII in 1509 and continuing through to all following monarchs, in 1625 the Tudor orb was placed in Westminster Abbey along with St. Edward's regalia. The sovereign's orb created for Charles II in 1661 is a hollow gold orb with a diameter of 16.5 centimeters and a weight of 1.2 kilograms, which is more than twice as heavy as the original. The equator is bordered by a band of jewels and pearls, and the top hemisphere also has a portion of the band. An amethyst sits atop the globe, topped by a cross made of gems, 1 sapphire, 1 emerald, representing the Christian world. A total of 375 sapphires, 375 pearls, 365 diamonds, 18 rubies, 9 emeralds, 9 sapphires, 1 amethyst, and 1 piece of glass are used to adorn the sphere. It is presented to the monarch at the coronation's investiture ceremony and carried subsequently when leaving Westminster Abbey with the left hand. Now let's talk about the sovereign's rings. All monarchs from William IV in 1831 through to Queen Elizabeth II in 1953 have worn the sovereign's ring, apart from Queen Victoria, whose fingers were too small to accommodate it. An octagonal sapphire in the center is surrounded by a ruby cross, 14 dazzling diamonds around the sapphire. The overall layout is meant to represent or resemble the blue of St. Andrew's Cross of Scotland and the red of St. George's Cross in England in the background. Since the early Middle Ages, rubies have been part of the coronation rings as a symbol of all kingly virtue. A small copy was made for Queen Victoria, who wrote in a letter, "The Archbishop had most awkwardly put the ring on the wrong finger, and the consequence was that I had the greatest difficulty to take it off again, which I at last did with a great deal of pain." Her jewellers had measured the wrong finger, and it was deposited at the Tower of London in 1919, along with the sovereign's ring and the Queen Consort's ring, which have been worn by all royal wives since Queen Adelaide. With two possible exceptions, most monarchs before 1831 were given new rings to represent their marriage to the country. Richard II presented Westminster Abbey with a solemn jewel, a gold ring with a precious stone called a ruby of no small value, to be worn by his successors. Evidence shows it was afterwards worn by Henry V. Another was Stuart coronation ring, probably used at the English coronations of Charles I and Charles II, and certainly that of James II, who took it into exile with him in France after the Glorious Revolution in 1688. It returned to the UK 100 years later and now belongs to the Royal Collection of Gems and Jewels. Alrighty, now let's end up this video with armills and spurs. The armills are genuine and wise gold bracelets. They were first used at the English coronations in the 12th century, much like the spurs. Armills were no longer given to the king or queen in the 17th century, instead they were just carried at the coronation. They are 4 centimeters wide and 7 centimeters in diameter, and the chaplave enamel on the surface with fleur-de-lis, thistles and harps, representing England, Scotland and Ireland. A new set of these had to be manufactured in 1661. The medieval custom was reintroduced for Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1653 on behalf of the other Commonwealth states. The Queen received a fresh set of armills made of simple 22-karat gold and lined with a crimson velvet. Each bracelet is equipped with an unnoticeable hinge and a Tudor rose-shaped clasp. The hallmark features a little image of the Queen, who wore the armills after leaving the Abbey and was later seen doing so when she appeared in the balcony of Buckingham Palace. She also wore the imperial state crown and the sovereign's ring as well as the arm hills. Now let's talk about these spurs. Charles II received big spurs that have been specially fashioned for the king or him. They are constructed of solid gold, lavishly embossed with floral motifs and scrolls, and feature a crimson velvet strap embroidered in gold. Each neck ends with a Tudor rose that has a spike in the middle and are symbols of chivalry and knighthood, also known as St. George's spurs. They signify the sovereign's position as head of the armed forces. The usage of the gold spurs is first recorded in 1189 at the coronation of Richard I. However, it is possible that they were originally used for Henry the Young King in 1170. This aspect of the ritual was likely influenced by the knight's imitation of ceremony. St. Edward's regalia at the Abbey was expanded in 1399 to include a pair of the mid-century spurs, which were worn at all coronations until they were destroyed in 1649. And since the restoration, spurs are no longer attached to the monarch's foot. Instead, they are simply brushed against the heels of kings and displayed to the queens. And that is it for today's video, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. It's my first video in over a year, and it took me a while to make it, to be honest. I started at like 3 o'clock and now it is 8:20. So it took me a while to make the video, and yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to watch this. So I really do hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and if you watched to the end, please give me a like and a subscribe, and I shall chat to you guys next time. Bye bye.